everybody except Barbara Comstock and 6 other members of the House of Delegates to agree to my bill, and I was supported by the Japanese American Citizens Association, to say that Virginia will not cooperate with the federal government in the arrest, detention, without trial, without legal counsel or habeas corpus of American citizens merely suspected of antisocial acts. And I was reading Breitbart News the other day, and I saw where in the Ukraine, the Congress, their legislature said you could detain people for a month without trial. And I thought, gosh, if only Congress would have done that, because there's no limit, no time limit on how long you can be detained. That clearly violates the Fourth Amendment, violates the Bill of Rights. We need to find these kind of grounds. I had the ACLU and John Birch Society agreeing with me. I'm the only person who can go after John Faust from the left and the right. Nobody else can do that because I've done it.
Does anybody need any water up there?
Yes. Yes. How does an air conditioner? The AC work?
Is it?
Thanks.
Tough question. Are you any stronger, Dan?
Howard, that was your question. Do you want any water?
Let's talk about over here.
Would it help to have those lights off?
No,
Just a button?
That's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
Maybe I'll rent water.
Mr. Lind, you pointed out that you were the only veteran in the race and have mentioned the U.S. losing ground in foreign policy. What would you have America do in response to the crisis in Ukraine?
Very good question. We are so far behind now, it's terrible, but there are some things that can be done. The United States Navy, the United States Air Force can be deployed over there. In the Eastern Mediterranean, they can be doing exercises, multilateral exercises with other countries in the Eastern Mediterranean, over the Baltic, if nothing else, to show that we care. Obama won't do that. He's weak. Our military has been corrupted from the top down. But that said, we can take strong economic sanctions. We should rescind all Russian officials from entering this nation, this country, the United States. We can do that today. Visas revoked. Not only that, freeze all of their financial assets in U.S. banks. Today it can be done. Now, a lot of the stolen wealth of the oligarchs is in Europe. All right, let's embolden the Europeans to do the same thing there. Well, they'll say that they've got energy blackmail from Russia, that Putin will shut off their energy supply. Okay, let's supply some energy to the European nations as best we can. It's the situation in the United States military right now. Let me just talk about that for a minute. When I say corrupted from the top down, Benghazi, we just heard last night in Ron Wilcox's Tea Party in Northern Virginia, betrayed. The betrayal of the 17 who were killed in the Chinook helicopter in August 6, 2011, still hasn't been told yet why they were shot down. That story, along with Benghazi, there's corruption from the Department of Defense, State Department, CIA. We need to come to the bottom of that. All those issues. I just get back to what is needed for this race right now to stand up to Barack Obama. In order to do that, we need to stand up within our party, and I've already mentioned it, but I'll say it again. We have poor leadership in the House of Representatives. We need people in Congress, leaders in Congress, to stand up to Barack Obama. We don't have that. We're just rolling over. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hollingshead, your website quotes you as calling Obama a liar, saying he ignores the law, and claiming he tracks our every movement. What would you do to stop the government abuse of the law and our privacy?
Well, there's a lot that needs to be done. The Congress of the United States and can use the tools that it has. For one, when the president makes a law that the Congress is supposed to make, in other words, when he writes a law, he can be sued by legislators who have standing. But also, you can pass other laws that simply overrule and make it impossible for another president to make these executive orders. So, for example, a lot of them have to do with denying our Fourth Amendment rights to, be secure in our own personal effects. And so, for example, Obama wrote an executive order ordering Homeland Security to tap into local traffic cameras and make a database of where everybody's car has been, just in case they might need to know where everyone's been. This violates the law. Hey, I ran an enforcement agency. I'm all for going after bad guys, but you got to get a warrant, right? If you're looking for individual people who've done bad things, that's great. But the notion of spying on everybody all the time, I feel like we're living in an Orwell novel, right? If you don't have anything to hide, what's the problem? Because the government never abuses information, right? The IRS never would use your personal information to do anything to take away your rights. But we need people in Congress who are aggressive about passing legislation to clarify what the Fourth Amendment means in these warrantless seizures and so forth, and also to use the courts aggressively to defend the Constitution against an overreaching president. And then we need to throw those guys out of the White House in 2 years.
Delegate Anderson, our current administration in Washington is all over the map on the global stage and has no apparent foreign policy strategy. Unless you consider bowing to foreign despots, making empty threats that you can't back up, and starting random illegal wars as a strategy. That was my little op-ed there. What is Barbara's opinion of the current, more and more conservatives are concerned with America's position on the world stage and what should be considered justifiable use of force. Where would you say Barbara comes down on that issue?
Aren't you glad you showed up tonight?
Yes, I'm grand all the time. Anybody want to talk about Virginia state issues? The United States, without question, in the last 5 years, has come perilously close to ceding its position of leadership on the world stage. There's no two ways about it. One can read it in the public media. One can hear it from those who still wear the cloth of the country. I spend a great deal of time at the Pentagon because I chair the Military and Veterans Caucus of the General Assembly. We do a number of cooperative programs. Barbara has been involved in those as a member of the Military and Veterans Caucus. And I can tell you, universally, I hear it from men and women wearing the uniform today, their concerns about the fact that we have ceded our position of leadership on the world stage. And in the area of the military instrument of national power, I believe, and I do believe that Barbara Comstock believes also, that we need to use that whenever it is appropriate and necessary and proportional and right. What we talked about earlier about the situation in the Ukraine, earlier, Benghazi, we need to have that capacity to act on the world stage. The other instruments of national power, diplomatic and economic, those equally have not been employed to any great effect in our relationships with other countries. We have got to do that. I can't imagine a Ukraine or a Benghazi happening during the watch of a Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Sabat, where do you stand on the president having the authority to have anyone, anywhere, killed via drone strike with accountability to no one?
Well, are you talking about U.S. citizens?
Yes,
Okay.
specifically U.S. citizens.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you are a United
Hopefully
States...
that's it.
I'm sorry?
Hopefully it's just U.S. citizens, we're not really sure.
There's two thoughts on the use of the drones. If you are, for example, in Afghanistan or when we were in Iraq, if it's used to take out terrorists that would protect American lives, obviously that's something that I would be for. I am for. I have a son that served in the United States Air Force for 13 years, and he was in both countries over there. And I can safely say that drones over there probably saved his life. As far as the United States citizens, if you are a citizen of this country, you have certain rights under the Constitution. You have the right to a trial. So I would think that unless this person was somebody was in the act of actually committing a crime that would injure other people's, if it was imminent, if it was immediate. And in a case like that, if it's to protect other lives, the same as a police officer might do something like that, then I would agree to that. But other times, no. You are a citizen of the United States, you are afforded certain rights under the Constitution, and you have the right to a trial.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now we're going to do the last round. All the candidates will be asked the same question. I'll pick a name out of the hat to see who gets the question first, and then after that we will take 15 minutes to take questions from the audience. I'll be the moderator of that. I would ask you, first raise your hand. I'll pick you to come up and speak. Please be concise, and as moderator, for whatever reason, if anything gets out of hand, I'll step in. And then the candidates, again, will have 2 minutes for those questions as well, for those answers. Okay, Mr. Wassinger, what is your opinion of the GOP House leadership? And what would you say to John Boehner if he came to your office on Capitol Hill to persuade you to take one for the team by voting for something that went against conservative principles and implied that your membership on an important committee was at stake?
Well, you know, in my latest role as chief of staff on the Hill, we had exactly those kind of conversations, particularly when it came to raising the debt ceiling. I counseled my member to vote no, despite what leadership would do. When he came in, too, this is Congressman Ben Caldwell, they gave him a couple of committees that weren't really all that good because they knew that they were dealing with the conservatives and not get along kind of Republican. I'll always put the interests of the 10th District first. My principles are not for sale, not to John Boehner or anybody else. I think Boehner and Cantor have let us all down in terms of how they've managed the debt ceiling, how they've managed the budget. And that little example I gave earlier about the spending from the International Trade Association, Boehner and Cantor are in on that. It's not, this isn't a Democrat problem. There is practically no difference between Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill when it comes to spending. And this is the question, I think, for voters in the 10th District. Are we going to join the revolution? Are we going to let it go by us? Are we going to join Rand Paul and start fighting against Obamacare and protecting our privacy, and Cruz and Mike Lee and all these other great leaders? Because they are standing up to leadership. And they're doing it all the time. And by the way, they're always going to say, look, well, we don't have the Senate right now, but we have the House, so we need to compromise. And then let's say we win the Senate. Then you know what they're going to say? Well, we've got this in the House, but we don't have the White House, so we need to compromise. Then let's say we have all three. We'll say, well, our margins aren't what they need to be. We need to compromise. Well, that's all hogwash. The time to fight is now. The time to stand up is now. And we can't do it by beginning every conversation by compromising. So I'd tell Boehner to go have this with someone else.
Thank you. Dr. Hollings had the same question. What is your opinion of the House leadership? And if you were asked to take one for the team?
Answer the second question first, which is, I don't think I'm ever going to have to be faced with that. You good people send me to Congress if you will, because I don't think John Boehner is going to be the Speaker of the House. We need fresh leadership up there in our party. I mean, look, what is the single, I mean, we're going to look for something. What is the single public policy victory of the last 5 years in Congress? It's a sequester. And we just gave it away. So this is going to be a year like 1994. We're going to retake the Senate. We're going to have, and so we're going to have a big class, a big freshman class in the House of Representatives that I hope includes somebody up here.
Are you gonna jump in the race too?
And so we need fresh leadership. We need people who want to follow the Constitution and not follow, last time I ran for Congress, it was 1994, I helped to put together the Contract with America. I was the 5th guy to get into the primary. 2 of us qualified for the ballot. I won, that was great. I lost in November, did better than any Republican since 1954 in that district. I was so excited though, I lost in the general, but I was so excited because my team won. And we took the purse strings of the federal government for the first time in 40 years, and I said, finally, we're going to restrain all this spending. And we had it for 12 years. And during those 12 years, the real inflation-adjusted size of the federal government went up by 40%. So that's the kind of thinking we got to get rid of. That establishment, go along, get along, we got to get rid of that. We need people who love the Constitution of the United States, who understand the principles of limited government and free enterprise. We need to take down that no button and take our country back. Thank you.
Mr. Lynn, you've had a few things to say about the House leadership this evening. Would you like to expound on the, hey Howie, could you take one for the team on this one?
Yeah, back in my baseball days in Virginia Tech, just take one for the team, yeah, take it in the chin. No. Again, this is not personal. It's just not personal. John Boehner, Eric Cantor, God love them, okay? They're not leading us in the right direction. So I'm sitting in my congressional office and 1 or 3 or all of them walk in and put that to me. I would say, thank you very much, sir. My priority is to serve on the House Armed Services Committee and or House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. I'd love to do that. If you deem that I can't, then I'll do whatever I can do. Good friends of mine, Steve King, Joe Wilson on the Hill, I'm sure have had that exact same thing happen to them, as it is Louis Gohmert and Trey Gowdy. I'm sure they've been sitting in their office and 1 or 3 of them walking in there and say, hey, come here, really got to take it. And I'm sure, I know, they've said, no thank you, sir. And so they're sitting on either no committee or just not the committees they want. Let me digress for a minute, okay? What is this race about? Is this race about a popularity contest? I don't think it is. This is serious business, deadly serious business. 3 examples how deadly serious this is. If this representative in the 10th district and the rest of the House of Representatives don't stand up to Obama, people will die under Obamacare, death panels. People will die when the United States Army is cut, like they're planning to cut it now, and we go overseas somewhere, and there will be an overseas somewhere. Americans will die needlessly. We keep the southern border unsecured. Americans will continue to die, as well as other people dying on the southern border because we can't protect our southern border. So, back to the question. Thank you very much, sir. Can I have another?
Thank you. Mr. Sabat, your opinion of the House leadership and the take one for the team, please, question.
Well, when I'm in Congress, I'm going to be representing the 10th district, the constituents of the 10th district, and those are the folks that I will be speaking for. And if I don't agree with the speaker, whether it's on any issue, I will politely tell the speaker that I can't side with him because it goes against the wishes of my district. As far as the speaker goes, I think we need to, I guess in the words of Donald Trump, you're fired. We need to, the next time when he comes up for re-election, we need to make sure he is not re-elected. We need somebody who's going to stand up for this country. You know, we all talk about what Barack Obama does and what he's been doing to this country, and he's been a horrible president. But perhaps maybe he couldn't have gone as far as he has with a lot of things that he's done. Maybe he feels as though he has free range because he knows that the Republican leadership is not doing anything to stand up against him. He is a bully. Nobody will stand up to him. Nobody will face him. Nobody will question what he does except maybe a couple of sound bites in front of the media. But what needs to happen is, as I said before, when the president doesn't do what he's supposed to do, we need to take him to court because he's violating the law. I want to say one thing real quick here. You can clap, it's okay. One thing I want to say is, we talked about Benghazi here a little while ago. I would go one step further. I think that the House Oversight Committee is kind of locked down right now. They've gone about as far as they can go. The Congress, in particular the Speaker, has the authority to appoint special counsels, and I think he needs to appoint, it's paramount that he appoint special counsels, not only for Benghazi, because we've had 4 people, including our ambassador, killed there, and you know, to tell Mrs. Clinton it does matter. And also he should do the same thing on the IRS as well, because it's a joke. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Marshall.
I'm not going to promise you anything on that because I've already done it. Let me give you examples. In 1993, the Democrat speaker came up to me and he stood next to my desk and pulled himself up and he said, Marshall, I didn't look at him, he said, I got half a mind to pull you off all committees, then what will you tell your people back in Manassas? I said, Mr. Speaker, there isn't the slightest chance you'll do that. And he said, oh, why is that? I put the calendar down and turned, looked at him, I said, I would have 24/7 to read all the bills, to raise points of order, to draft amendments, and make your life a living hell. When you realize what opportunities I would have, he put me on committees that met more often, not less. Right, keep me busy. In 2006, the Republican caucus agreed with Bill Howell, the Speaker, to basically make it very difficult, if not impossible, for you to find out what we're doing in subcommittee. And they said, remember, this is the caucus rule. If you don't agree, you're kicked out. I voted no. The question came up, are you going to kick me out? I said, go ahead and make my day, because you will make me a martyr. You may be stupid, but you're not that stupid. So they backed out, and they didn't kick me out of the caucus. That was secret votes. I was the only Republican to vote, against the rule. In 2012, I talked to one of the chief aides of Eric Cantor, and I said, look, you need to go back and sue under the origination clause because the law that was passed, the taxes did not originate in the House. Long story short, they didn't do it. They missed an opportunity to do this. I also decided in 2007 to sue the Speaker. He didn't like that. I sued the governor, sued the attorney general. Two of those were my party colleagues. You know what? I take an oath of office of allegiance to you. An oath is a swearing to God that you will do or not do certain things. I adhere to principles. I don't adhere to personalities.
Delegate Anderson, you've been a trooper this evening, and a bit of a tough spot. This is probably the hardest question for you to answer for someone else, but it is a key question, and so take your best shot.
I'll take my best shot, but I would ask for a point of personal privilege. Let me take the best shot for myself. And the best shot for myself is this. This go along to get along style of leadership always fails. And we've seen that play out under the speakership of Speaker Boehner. It does not work. It never works. Imagine the sort of things that have resulted from his inability to exercise the strength of the United States House of Representatives to stand up in the face of this Democratic caucus on the Hill and this administration in the White House and what we have seeded as a result. We have had the greatest dysfunction, I think, in the history of the Republic since. Think about back in the age of the 1990s. Speaker Newt Gingrich, contract with America, a balanced budget. And I do believe very strongly that this nation needs a balanced budget amendment in the Constitution of our nation. But one thing is certain about this whole issue of whether that we have a competent speaker or not. It is absolutely crucial that Nancy Pelosi never serve in the office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives again.
Any comments on Delegate Comstock's position on the House leadership?
I'm sorry, Steve.
Any comments on Delegate Comstock's position?
I think it would be unfair for me to try to articulate that just simply because I've never sat down and talked with her about her perspective on that issue.
Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for that. We're going to go to the last round here, which is going to be, let's see, it's 8:26. So why don't we go to a quarter till, and then we can wrap it up there. That works for you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question of the candidate? Yes, Joan, you're first.
Hi, gentlemen. Mr. Lynn, you spoke earlier about all the deaths, the possibility of death. And in this country right now, millions of people have died before they've had a chance to take their first breath. So, gentlemen, if you would tell me what each of your positions is on the life issue, and if you say you are pro-life, would you tell me whether that's 100%, no exceptions, or not? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joan. That's a great question. You just asked 5 questions. And we don't have time to take up 5. So if you could all just very quickly, within 15, 20 seconds, just answer the question, please. We'll start with you, Mr. Wassinger.
Well, I don't have as many children as Stephen does. I have 11, 7 boys, 1 girls. We've got our own little caucus going. I'm very pro-life. I believe life begins at conception. And during my time on the Hill with Senator Brownback, I drafted all of his pro-life legislation, from embryonic stem cell research. I wrote the Human Cloning Prohibition Act, which has been turned into model legislation all across the country. We fought the Bush administration on a lot of things that were undermining the issue of life. So I'm 100% pro-life, and I think that's it's just a fundamental issue. And if you get that one wrong, you get everything else wrong.
I agree. No exceptions?
No exceptions.
That's a great way to ask it, maybe to be concise. Delegate Marshall, I know you'll have a lot to say on this subject. We don't have a 20-second sign in the back, so I might just interrupt anyone they go along.
Okay, in 1973, I drafted an amendment as a member of the Office of Economic Opportunity to cut off abortion litigation with Legal Services Corporation. This was supposed to be an agency to help the poor with their rent. It ended up doing the research for Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton. In 1976, as a private citizen, I and a friend of mine devised the Hyde Amendment, cutting off tax-funded abortions for Medicaid. No exceptions at all. As an aide to Congressman Dornan, I did that for 3 areas of abortion funding: military, DC, and foreign affairs. I introduced a personhood bill in Congress. Matter of fact, in 1972, I tried to get a Democrat that I was working for to join a constitutional amendment that was introduced by Congressman John Schmitz from Southern California.
Delegate Marshall.
We need to respect the right to life. Without that, no other rights are useful. You can't even get mugged in the park if you're killed before birth.
No exceptions, I assume.
Strongly pro-life, no exceptions. 4 grown daughters, 2 granddaughters just born last fall. I've been strongly supportive of the pro-life, the Family Foundation in Richmond for many, many years. It's a life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. There's no asterisk saying except for babies. This debate, it's Roe v. Wade is a terrible law. It should be repealed. Go back to the states. I'm strongly pro-life. Thank you.
Thank you. No exceptions? Any exceptions? Thank you. I'm sorry, Dr. Hollingshead. Jeff Williams, standing over there, has a basket full of pieces of paper that are for a straw poll. So if he could pass those out, and you could fill that out in terms of your impressions of who did what in this event, that would be great. I'm sorry, Dr. Hollingshead, go ahead.
All human life is precious, without exception. I have 6 daughters and 7 sons. I only brought 11 of my 13 children because I didn't want Robin. Here. But this is the only country in the world founded on an idea of the fact of human dignity. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator. But, it's the right to life comes before all other rights. That's what makes America America. It needs to be defended. I would introduce a Human Life Protection Act that says life begins at fertilization. The 14th Amendment says all persons do equal protection of the laws, and we need to enforce that through Congress.
Thank you, Dr. Hollingshead. No exceptions. No exceptions.
I said that first.
I'm sorry. Delegate Anderson.
I'll cut straight to the chase. I know that Barbara is strongly pro-life, has voted as such, has accumulated a record as such. I don't know, I can't answer the question about exceptions. We've never been confronted with that, so I don't know where she stands on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Savick?
Pro-life, no exceptions, and I would also add that when I have conversations on this issue with some of my liberal friends, and friends in quotes, by the way, I asked them if their daughter was pregnant in the early stages of pregnancy, and walking down the street, and God forbid that she was killed by an assailant. Should that assailant be charged with 1 or 2 homicides? And that's the way I've turned them around, because they always say 2.
You can vote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Great, concise responses there. Yes, Mr. Shaw.
Gentlemen, I have a question actually I'd like to direct to
Just go to 1, please.
If Delegate Anderson, if Ms. Comstock is pro-life, why is she accepting more than $100,000 of pro-homosexual, pro-abortion interests? And further on, why is she pushed for birth control pills by the high schoolers? And similarly, absolutely no movements towards anti-pornography or to restrict it. And those are very serious questions in my mind, and I just would be interested in.
Unfortunately, I don't feel equipped to be able to answer those. That's the first time I've heard those observations, and therefore, I just don't feel equipped to address them.
Well, as I say, that's something that I think is very significant. Very questionable as to she might talk pro-life, but I have not seen it.
If you'll see me afterwards, I'll be happy. I will get an answer.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, Ron, you had your hand up.
Ron Wilcox from the Tea Party. This is the first time I've asked this question, so I guess I'll ask Howie since he called out my name twice. Our politicians have been very clever and creative, inventive ways to avoid accountability for their votes. Bond referendums, the super committee, sequester, a lot of mechanisms so they can't have accountability. What will you do to roll that back to our elected officials accountable to the people?
Open votes, open record votes, website. Any citizen can look anytime to see how the representative voted. When you started that question, immediately I thought of the General Assembly voice vote for the terrorist mosque in Falls Church. I haven't talked to Mr. Anderson about this, but I've talked to some others down there. What an abomination that is. If you don't know about it, there's a Falls Church mosque that has known terrorist links from 9/11 all the way up to Major Hassan, the whole thing. They commended it. They passed a commendation for this mosque in Falls Church. Virginia General Assembly did. It was voice vote, just sped through, oh yeah, yeas, nays, okay, yeas got it. What? No. Let's get that on record, something like that. In Congress, it's the same way. Get it on record, get it on the website so everybody can see it. None of this hiding behind all these shenanigans that they go for. That's my short answer.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Given that the 10th district is home to a lot of federal employees, and given the recent sequester and how that played out for Republicans, would you have supported the sequester or not supported the sequester?
Maybe just a quick response if possible.
I absolutely support the sequester. We can be smarter though about how we control government spending, and we can have a better military than what we have now, but I absolutely support the sequester, very much needed. Should have been bigger.
Thank you, Mr. Wassinger. Delegate Marshall.
I introduced a bill this year that says that no federal employee would be subject to debt collection or have their electricity shut off during a federal shutdown. And that was my response at this level. Part of what we're doing is the excessive spending, wasteful spending, and the lack of serious oversight. A $300 million blimp was authorized to be a military observation platform. And it cost $300 million. It was used once. The general or the contracting personnel in charge of it decided not to use it, sold it back to the company that made it for $300,000. If we're short on money, we're short on serious oversight. We shouldn't be getting into these circumstances with the debt. I would put in amendments that match spending to revenues.
So support, I'm sorry, Delegate Marshall, support or oppose the sequester?
I'd have to look at that. I've not voted, I voted against the Virginia budget when we borrowed money from Red China. I would have supported some version of that. I don't know which one was on the floor at that time.
Okay,
But
thank
somehow,
you.
yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lynn?
I would support it. You know, I'm a strong supporter of the United States military, the national defense, totally adrift right now. I would support the sequester. Yes, there's a lot of federal employees. I was one. I know people all across this district that are federal employees. They also know that our country is in grave danger, not an attack right now, but falling apart from within. Our massive spending and debt under this president and the last one, but mostly this one, we've had, okay, economists talk about how a country like ours could collapse financially. If the debt ratio is 120% to the GDP, which is approaching now, then it's unrecoverable. We could already be on financial collapse situation, we just don't know it yet. This country is in grave danger of financial catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Alexander?
I support the sequester. We have more debt per capita in this country than Greece. We need to start paying it back. But the biggest thing we can do to balance our budget, we have got to get growth going again. In the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office says that if we only had average growth, usually after a recession you have above average growth, only average growth would add $400 billion a year to the Treasury's coffers. So we've got to repeal Obamacare, reform our ridiculous tax system, and yank back on the regulatory state. That'll bring more money into government. So we need to do that. Hey, I want an award for managing federal employees. Federal employees want to be effective, and we need to give them the tools to do that. Managers in the federal government don't have the same tools that a lot of us who have run companies in the private sector have had. I'm a member of an elite club. I fired a federal employee and won all the court cases. But we need to allow managers to have the same kind of private sector tools that the private sector folks do.
You want to ride to the White House to fire somebody?
Thank you. Delegate Anderson?
Support the sequester as a mechanism to reduce the budget. However, it was targeted entirely unfairly. 50% of those cuts were targeted toward the Department of Defense, and every other cut across every other department and federal agency. That's an indicator of the devotion that this administration has to national security and national defense.
Thank you.
Is that your position in Barbara's? Oh.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, Mr.
I also would have supported it, and we need to go so much further in this country. Our tax system is broken, like Stephen said. What we need to have is a fair tax in this country that will bring to the surface the $2 trillion in an underground economy, which would bring us somewhere between $500 and $600 billion in revenue. So that was just a start. We also saw a lot of media hype over that it was going to hurt people. But that was the Democrats controlling our message. We need to do a better job of controlling our message.
Thank you. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I think what we'll do is take one more question, and then if that person wants to have it addressed by every candidate, that'll be the last question. So, do you want to have it answered by all, or you want it?
I want it to be answered by the person who's going to answer it fast and, most to my liking. So however that's going to we can elect who we want to Congress, we can elect who we want to the White House, and it's all for naught as long as there is such radical judicial activism. How would you rein in the judiciary?
I got an answer to that.
I knew it'd be good.
I'm trying to jump ahead of Bob Marshall because he's actually written the Constitution too. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution says that the lower courts are the creation of Congress. The only thing Congress can't change about the court system is the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. All the rest is created by Congress. So Congress can simply, as in Virginia, when this judicial activist judge struck down our marriage amendment that we voted on, Congress can simply say, under Article 3, Section 2, Congress can simply remove the consideration of those questions from the appellate court system in the United States. It's only been done a handful of times, but it's an important power that Congress has, and we need to do it.
Actually, when I worked for Congressman Bob Dornan, we drew up legislation like that. Fellow legislative assistant Chubba Bedlick and myself worked on this, and the congressman introduced it. Moreover, when the Hyde Amendment was being challenged, McRae versus Harris, I went down to legislative drafting, to the lawyers, and said I want an amendment on the appropriation bill that deals with the Supreme Court. You know, when you think of a judge, you think of white marble, robes, things like this, very sedate people. You don't think of them walking over from the Supreme Court in business suits to ask for money, but that's what they do. I drew up an amendment, and I said, if this McRae v. Harris passes, we're stripping all the money for the entire Supreme Court clerks to one justice, and they can share it however they want to do it. I said, if they're meddling too much with the money, they have too much time on their hands. That's a real quick way. I can get a vote on that. There's 13 appropriation bills that come up every year. You have to wait to get this out of committee. I would get this on the floor, kill those clerks. I mean, their money.
We do have a few more minutes left. Mr. Hadro here, I know you had a question right in front of you.
It's Delegate Anderson tonight. I took an hour of my time to drive here to get here in time tonight, so through traffic. I appreciate the fact that you made an effort to be here tonight, and but I haven't heard why the person you represent, Barbara Comstock, couldn't make it here tonight. So can you answer that specifically?
Why she's not here tonight?
Right.
I received a phone call, and she asked if I would have participated in this tonight. And the reason was, she had committed some 2 months ago to a family foundation event tonight, up, I think, north of where we are. And she had already committed to that and felt obligated to go. I think she has a role at the dinner tonight.
If she's elected to this position, then will you be taking the oath of office for her?
Mrs. Anderson didn't raise a full.
Can I make a comment about that? Sure. Time to make a comment. I think it was Howie Linden made a comment before that there were 2 tea parties in the Shenandoah Valley that had a joint meeting to accommodate Mrs. Comstock because she had not gone to any of the other meetings before that. I attended that meeting. It was one of their mass meetings. And the reason why she did not attend, the chairman read an email from her campaign manager that said because others were going to be speaking that night, she thought she was going to have the floor alone. That's why she wasn't there. We've all been to other events where she has either shown up and then left and not taken questions. And I think it's vital what we're doing here tonight by taking questions from the constituents. Not showing up, I think, is a clear message of the way that she will act when if she gets to the House of Representatives. Thank you.
We are just about out of time. I'm going to give one more question in the back to Drew Cooney, who's the most important guy in this room, because he's been our timer this evening. Let's give Drew a big hand. Yes or no, right?
It's a yes or no question, and it's a 2-part question. I often feel that my representatives...
Yes and 2 no's?
Either or.
Okay.
I often feel that my representatives forget who I am. As the representative of the 10th District, you will be representing nearly 750,000 constituents. Constituents, thank you. Is that an appropriate ratio? And what you feel... Is that an appropriate ratio, and would you champion changing that?
Want me to go first?
Sure. Certainly.
Okay. Right now, it's what we have to live with. I think that they should.
Yes or no?
No. And what was the second part? I'm sorry.
Would you change it?
Would you champion changing that?
Yes.
I think it's appropriate because I do not want this congressional beast to grow any larger.
No and no. The biggest thing we need to do is get rid of the 17th Amendment so that we can yank government back down to the local level where we can have small. Okay.
No, I mean, we need people in Congress to stand up to what we've been saying all along, massive spending and debt, Barack Obama's left-wing agenda, which is ruining our country. So, no, sorry.
Unless there's a just war, I'm not going to vote
Yes or no?
for it. I didn't understand the question. It seemed you were talking about the size of the congressional districts. That's determined by the census.
Yes, I'm talking about nearly 750,000 of us are represented by one of you. Our voices, I feel, often get lost. Is that appropriate ratio, and would you champion changing it?
The census determines that. I put my cell phone on my website.
If I'm not mistaken, the Constitution sets a lower limit on the number of constituents. It does not set an upper limit.
No, it had a minimum that you had to have originally. We've grown. The size of 435 was set in 1912. Hasn't changed since then.
That's what I was saying. It has a lower limit of the number of constituents that you have to represent. It does not set a maximum limit.
I don't want a 1,000-member House of Representatives.
Okay, and Mr. Wassinger?
No and no.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Can we get closing statements?
Yes, I was just going to say, we have, I think it is worth the time to give everyone 1 minute to make your closing statement. Before I do that, I want to thank a few people. I'd like to first thank the candidates and Delegate Anderson who came tonight. I'd like to thank the Manassas Tea Party Board for the work that they put in, and Drew Cooney in the back again. And I'd like to, there's two ladies in the back who've been working our table, and I would like to thank them as well. One last word, the raffle that I was pitching earlier is vitally important to our mission, which is to educate our fellow citizens, our friends, neighbors, family, about the importance of liberty and preserving it, because we're not preserving it. And the reason we're not preserving it is because our friends and neighbors aren't aware of the importance of it. So if you could help us by buying a raffle ticket, that would be a wonderful thing. Okay, end of the infomercial. We're going to have a tightly timed 1 minute closing argument. And then again, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Mr. Watts, we'll start with you.
Good, thank you for hosting us tonight. It was a good conversation. I think it comes down to the fact that this country is under assault. We're surrounded by debt. The debt ceiling gets increased every year or more often. And it's one of the best tools that we have to restrain spending. And the debt is so bad now. We're not talking about the effect on our children and grandchildren. We're talking about the effect on us. We're talking about us right now. And it's at a crisis point. We need to get serious about reforming Congress and getting spending under control. And like I said before, we've got some great leaders that are championing that cause now in both the House and the Senate. I think leadership needs to change in both the House and the Senate. And this younger generation of conservatives that's coming in is willing to take the fight to the establishment and win. And we need to be a part of that fight. So I would appreciate all of your votes on April 26th. Don't forget to vote in the Firehouse primary. It's a critical, critical election. Thank you very much.
I suspect the NSA has illegally developed a list of gun owners in the United States, whether eavesdropping on phones, on credit cards, and on internet searches. That has to stop. I support states becoming part of the United States again. For example, I wrote all 4 border state governors asking them to spend their time and erect a wall between the United States and Mexico that conforms to the construction standards of the portion of the wall that has been built. I introduced legislation this year to set up interstate compacts for coal, natural gas, and oil. If states did this and could set their own standards according to the best practices of industry for safety and for recovery, we could get around the clamp that EPA has on us. Right now, Russia is able to extort Western Europe. If we didn't pull out We get 23% of our oil from Africa and from the Middle East. If that could go to the Western Europeans, they would not be subject to extortion by Putin right now.
Thank you, Delegate Marshall.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you all for being here again. This is a great, great event tonight. I'm going to spend my next 58 seconds talking about national defense and military. What we have right now in the United States military is totally corrupted. What I mean by that, from top down, political correctness is driving this military into doing bad things. The Benghazi, quickly on Benghazi, right? What happened that day? We still don't know the answers yet. But one thing we do know, there were one general, one admiral fired that day. Admiral Charles Goyette was a battle group commander for the USS Stennis Battle Group in the North Arabian Gulf. He launched 2 jets to support and defend the consulate under attack. He was told, recall the jets. He said, no, sir, I'm protecting Americans, and they're going. They fired him, whoever they is, White House, whatever, fired him on the spot, relieved him of his command, and they recalled the jets. Why don't we know about that? Because we have political correctness, and what happens is when these admirals and generals disagree, they get sent to the door, but on the way out to the door, they're told, and if you say anything about this, then you'll lose your security clearance. That's un-American. That's not the nation I know. Thank you.
I agree with Admiral Mike Mullins that the single biggest national security threat to the United States is our debt. We've got to get our economy moving again. That's the crisis that we need to address. All the unemployment, and so I know there are a lot of great candidates. We need somebody who's going to go across that river and stand up to those yahoos over there, the Washington establishment, the career politicians of both parties, and Barack Obama, and get them to stop. Of all the folks here, I've got the broadest business experience. I'm, the only one who's gone over there and tried to run any of that nonsense government and actually save the taxpayers some waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'm the only guy up here, or not here, who has taught the Constitution of the United States. I understand the springs of liberty and free enterprise that made this country great and strong in the first place. I will go there and make those guys stop it so that the private sector can come roaring back. Appreciate your vote.